The Black Church, this is our story, this is our song. WNSB and Stay of the Water has teamed up with PBS and WHRO in debuting Lewis Henry Gates' documentary, The Black Church. All month, we'll be talking to local pastors of black churches here in the area to discuss the significance of the black church in our community. Today, we'll be speaking with Pastor Christopher Carter, pastor of New Hope Baptist Church in Hampton, Virginia. And in the second hour, we'll discuss the GOP. Where do we go from here? Is it a fractured party? We'll be back in just a moment on Stay of the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Claville. Welcome back. You're listening to Stay of the Water, and I'm your host, award-winning Dr. Eric Claville. Happy Sunday and happy Black History Month. All month, we'll be debuting and talking with pastors from black churches to talk about the impact of the church in our community. Today, we have Pastor Christopher Carter, who is the pastor in Hampton, Virginia, of the great church of New Hope Baptist Church. Pastor Carter, so glad to have you with us.
So glad to be with you, Dr. Claville, on the Lord's Day.
Wonderful, wonderful. Again, I know this is the Sunday, and I know pastors are very busy and with your own flock and your ministry. So we really thank you for taking the time out to come on Stay of the Water to talk with us about what many of us in our country already know in our community, but not so much in the country, how important the role of the black church is in our lives. Mm-hmm. You know, we're doing this partnership with PBS and WHRO to helping to debut the Lewis Henry Gates documentary, The Black Church. This is our story, and this is our song. And it's a documentary that talks about the beginnings of our church in the black community, the history of our church in the black community, and then we're going to delve into the social, the economic, the spiritual impact and the economic impact that we have, that the black church has. You know, being a pastor, we know that you do a lot of things, right?
Mm-hmm.
and really only pastors can really empathize with what other pastors have to go through. So, with that, tell us about your role and how you actually came into ministry at New Hope Baptist Church.
Well, I was called into ministry at New Hope Baptist Church in November 10th of 1994. I was called as senior pastor there. I was, I believe, 25 or 26 years old. And I've been pastoring there. This is going into the 27th year as pastor.
Congratulations.
We started in Newport News in the East End community. And in 2006, we moved into a new edifice in Hampton on Big Buster Road.
Oh, absolutely wonderful. And the ministry that you have in New Hope, tell us a bit about the various services that you offer and the various ministries that you have.
I'm hearing some feedback a little bit.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I hear somebody else.
Okay. All right.
Some music or something.
Okay, well, we're going to take care of that, but can you tell us a little bit about your ministry at New Hope?
Our ministry is what we call the ministry of the mind, body, and soul. We not only deal with the spiritual, but we deal with the physical. And we have women ministry, men's ministry, youth ministry, and we do the community. We have impacted the community really during the pandemic, where we have fed youth when they was out of school. We have had where you could get the flu shot back in November. We were able to have testing for COVID, as well as we signed up over 300 persons to get the COVID vaccine on last week. So our church plays an important role in the community, as well as in the political spectrum. When we have, we'll deal with a lot of social issues to make sure that the needs of the community are met by those persons who are supposed to represent the community by way of politicians. And we do a lot of things, again, spiritually as well as socially.
Now, you have a very unique role as well, because not only you're a pastor and of a very thriving ministry there in Hampton on the Peninsula, but you also run a funeral home or part of a funeral home.
Yeah.
So tell
My
us.
My wife and I own a funeral home, Newport News, C.C. Carter Funeral Home. That's correct.
So tell us how that relationship actually works with marrying, baptizing, christening, and then everything in between, all the way to the grave.
Well, basically, one could say that as a pastor and on the funeral home, I see him from the cradle to the grave. In owning the funeral home for the last 10 years, been in the funeral industry for about 30 years, it has been somewhat of a ministry that we're able to minister with persons. And then there are persons who don't have churches, that they're not affiliated with local churches, where they end up having the funeral services at New Hope. And through us ministering them and in aftercare, a great deal of family members or persons who have attended the funerals have become members of New Hope Baptist Church through our ministry, as ministering to them in their time of need as an outreach. So it plays a role, as well as when young brothers have been murdered on the street.
Yes.
We buried so many of them. I eulogized many of them.
Wow.
And it's a way that I was able to minister to many of them. It's unique where I have a lot of the young brothers come up to me after the services at the cemetery, or they'll see me in the street, see me at stores or something, and they'll walk up to me and say, "Hey, you preached my boy's funeral, man. You did a good job, or you said a good word. You gave me some words." So it's a wonderful combination where God has placed me in this season where I'm able to have a ministry and an impact in the community, where I've hired people from the community, as well as minister to the community too.
How now? I mean, that's got to be tough, and it seems like you're juggling so much at one time and just being one person, the spiritual, and you mentioned basically from the cradle to the grave. How is it that you as a pastor can cope with all of those pressures and responsibilities at one time?
Well, I was always told a long time ago in school that a good leader knows how to designate authority, and therefore I can't do it all by myself. I will not take the credit all by myself, but I have a good team at New Hope Baptist Church of associate ministers and administrator, deacons and trustees and ministers to do what they need to do. And then I also have a good team at the C.C. Carter Funeral Home that work and do a great job. So they help me balance the load.
One thing that we see that we've seen in our country as it relates to what's called, quote unquote, the black church, and African Americans and changing of America is the role of the church in civil rights and social justice. So when we talk about social justice, civil rights movement, the classical civil rights movement, as we call it here in the 60s and 50s, you see pastors, leading. Of course, one of the most well-known, of course, is Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who we celebrate a holiday of, and many, many more pastors took up the mantle, to march, to be leaders in those movements. I mean, but now we're seeing a new social justice movement, the Black Lives Matter movement. Tell us how your church or the black church itself has played a vital role in this particular movement.
Well, back in the summer when we hit the marches, I marched with those in Hampton, from Hampton University to the City Hall, with the Black Lives Movement, and we had the movement young man by the name of Edward Jones, if I correct, who sponsored that, and I've marched with them. There was another young man, Pastor Cartwright. He had a movement back in the summer as well at New Market Center, and he had the police chief from both cities was there. I was there. So I played a role, and I've allowed the church to play a role in the Black Lives Matter movement. But to piggyback on something you said, back then in the church, you have to remember we didn't have social media.
Right.
So the call, the drum major, the call was the church. The black church was looked at as the place, as you know, all the way from slavery up, as where you could get what information you need for the black community. It was a strong component. So now with social media, with all of the things you have, everybody have their sphere and everybody going their way. But I wish and pray and hope that we can come together as one powerful voice, because when we're splintered like we are in so many factions of everybody speaking this, speaking that, it sounds like it's different voices, and you would have the enemy would try to give voice that where those people are violent and those people are this and those people are that, which they're not. So that's why if we could merge our efforts together as one voice and come together, we could be, I believe, a little more powerful than, we're doing some things, but I think we can be a little more powerful. We merge again.
You mentioned social media, and it's kind of hard to imagine our lives, without social media. But there was a time when you had to write a letter and put a stamp on it and mail it in order to get a message to somebody. There was a time when you had to pick up a black newspaper and get the news. But as you stated, now we got social media and one voice that you said needs to be had. So tell me this: is the black church as significant now in social justice as it was in the 60s and 50s? Or has it taken a back seat to the more what we call the grassroots movement?
To be honest, I think we've taken the back seat.
Wow.
Again, we're splintered. You can't get much done when you have various groups around the place because, again, you can divide and conquer. Somebody got to be a leader and somebody got to be a follower. And just because I'm pastor doesn't necessarily mean I have to be the leader. If we have a good leader in way of one of these grassroots groups, let's sit down, come to the table of reasoning, and say, okay, hey, you got a good idea. What can we do to get behind you? And we can push our Congress and the community to do what we need to do.
You said something that, what we call speak truth to power, right? Mm-hmm. And, I think that is the actual case, but you don't hear too many people saying it, What do you think is maybe the fear or the trepidation or the hesitation to say what you said and for somebody to rise up and take the lead?
I feel that sometimes people don't want to be politically correct. And as you can see, Dr. Ralph Abernathy, Roy Wilkins, Dr. King, Fannie Lou Hamer, they wasn't politically correct. Even some entertainers, Eartha Kitt and persons like that, they put their careers on the line for being not politically correct, but for speaking up.
Billie Holiday with Strange Fruit. That's right.
Yeah, and so many more. In such a time as this, when things seem like we're going backwards rather than forward, if the Trumpsters or the Patriot Act could do what they do, then we don't need to go as far as they went. But we need to stand and rise. And I think only when we stand and rise and we do economical boycotts and we show people where our money is only when people start listening to us. And we can't be silent anymore. We need to stand up and speak out for social injustice. Like when we look at the vaccines, right now we are disproportionately getting the vaccines in the African American and Latino community. So here goes again, where people of color are taking the back seat in something as serious as this. So it's time that we stand up and stand out.
Come on now. Well, look, I don't know if you came on the call to preach, but you just gave a word. Well, you're listening to Stay with the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Claville. Our special guest today is Pastor Chris Carter, who's pastor of New Hope Baptist Church in Hampton, Virginia. WNSB all month is teaming up with PBS and WHRO to talk about the Black church. This is our story. This is our song, which actually debuts by Henry Louis Gates on February 16th through 17th here on your local PBS station. Pastor Carter, you mentioned the economic part of the church. I mean, we've talked about the church itself from a spiritual standpoint, and we know that you play a unique role from cradle to grave with the funeral home that you're also administrator and owner of. And we talked about social justice then and now, but economics, African Americans have not been at the forefront and not had the advantage of America for a long time. We just really started after the civil rights legislation of the 1960s and 70s, having an opportunity to participate in the economics of our country. But the Black church stood in the gap. Tell us how the Black church itself really became a help for economic driver in the Black community, and what's happening now?
Well, because the Black church had become more sophisticated and educated, We have people, we are educated now. Our pastors are educated, seminary trained. Many of us have MBAs and things, and we have administrators and other persons. So now we have, doctors, lawyers, bankers in our churches. There are some African-American churches that have credit unions. We look at Dr. Floyd Flake Church, Allen Temple in New York, how they took a whole community, city block, and redeveloped and revitalized.
That's right.
So one of the things we do in our churches now is we try to have what we call financial workshops, and we educate our people about investing, about saving, about insurance. That one of the things we need to let people know, insurance is just not for the bury the dead, but good insurance is to protect your investments or your family investment when one of the breadwinners suddenly or pass away. So now we become an engine of economical viability where we teach our people how to be better stewards of what God has blessed them with in the way of their finances. Absolutely.
And, there's so many other ministries and what we call, quote unquote, mega ministries or mega churches and what they're doing, to push the envelope for economic upward mobility. But it like you said, it wasn't as sophisticated and persons weren't not as degreed and able to go to college at that time. So back in the day, how did the Black church become the economic driver in the community?
I think one of the things that helped is when they saw that they weren't getting anywhere socially on the main stage, they got together and said, look, we got to come together and support our businesses, support our church, support our local things, and we have to show them better than we can tell them. And so therefore, our mothers and grandmothers and granddaddies and daddies, everybody got together and they started supporting their own communities. Back in the day in Newport News was thriving with local Black businesses in 25th and Jefferson Avenue. You had the Crown Savings Bank, which was a Black bank. And we had those things. We had stores and restaurants and cleaners and theaters, the Dixie theaters that we supported. And when desegregation came, a lot of that stuff we lost. And we lost who we were as a person, as people, economically. You got to remember Rosewood and Tulsa. Even back in Jim Crow in 1920s and 30s, they were thriving.
Absolutely.
And so we have to reinvest back in our communities and reinvest back in ourselves and trust one another. That's the big factor. We have to learn to trust one another again and support one another.
You brought back, while you were talking, you brought back ministries, memories in ministry. And I remember, growing up, you had the person who owned the beauty shop, and that's where all the women went to get their hair done. And somebody had a barber shop, and that's where everybody went to get their hair cut. Somebody had a lawn service. Somebody was an electrician. Somebody was a plumber. Somebody, like you said, owned the insurance company. Somebody owned the funeral home. And you always had great cooks, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, so, again, I remember growing up, because I grew up in church all my life, and, it was the church was the center of our life. It just wasn't something you do on Sunday. You go for an hour, have mass, and then you come home. But it was the center of our lives where, you would go there not just on Sunday, but on Saturday, maybe you'll clean up, choir rehearsal. You go there on Monday night, maybe for Bible study. You go Tuesday night, Women's Guild, Wednesday night, men's service. And it just keeps going on. And you have all these things in the center of our lives.
And let's not forget, today there are many people kind of scoff at it because we have gotten educated to tell people about tithes and offerings. But when our parents and grandparents wasn't as educated about tithes and offerings back then, they sold dinners. They did what they had to do to get that building built or to get that addition built. And they worked hard,
Absolutely.
For the kingdom of God.
Absolutely. I remember we had this thing called giving pounds, and it was every fifth Sunday for the pastor. Because, again, like you said, people didn't have a lot of money. Everybody was trying to make it. And so people would go fishing on that Friday morning and come back, freeze it, and give it to the pastor on that Sunday, or maybe cook a pound cake or pecan pie or something like that. And I'm talking about food. I'm getting hungry already. But
I know that's right.
but again, Pastor, talking with you, it just brings up memories of how, the black church itself, because we didn't have a lot of places to go. We didn't have a lot of things that we could do, right? Mm-hmm. So it was one of these things where we actually had to, the church was the place where we could go feel comfortable, the place we can go and feel welcome, where we can go and also put our burdens down, lay our burdens down, as the song says. And the church cared for the people in the community. And part of that care in the community was the singing. Mm-hmm. And really still is. Talk to us about, in your opinion, the role of the music in our churches.
The music, when we go back to people like, the late Aretha Franklin and Gladys Knight, Dionne Warwick, and we look at singers like Marvin Gaye, most of them say it came down the road. It comes from the church. Even today, guys like the group in Jodeci. The church have fostered
MC Hammer.
MC Hammer, exactly. Right. The church have fostered with people who had talent, God-given talent, to be able to use that talent and to showcase that talent. And in them showcasing that talent, they've had a choir and musical instruments behind them to help develop that talent. When you are in a state, sometimes when the word can't get you, the music can get you. That's why it is important that everybody, from the drummer to the guitar player to the soloist, must be anointed, so that what they do, it flows throughout the house and affect the people of God or people that's trying to reach God.
All right.
And so the music plays a very important role.
Absolutely. And you mentioned how, you mentioned multiple artists, right? So you went all the way back, from not just the rap and R&B, but you also went to also this new swing music. When you talk about Jodeci and the like. Tell us, I think a lot of people don't understand how many stars came out of the church.
Oh, wow.
And when I think about it, you think about Whitney Houston, and her mother. How exactly how she was a singer in the gospel music, and then she got her start in church. Aretha Franklin, as you mentioned, and many, many others just come to mind of how their talent, really was birthed in the church. And the role of just structuring, the role of cultivating your talent, that's another role of the church. Tell us from your perspective, how you were actually mentored and structured and cultivated in your church community.
As a little boy, grew up in the church. Like you said, Saturdays, we would go to the youth choir rehearsals, and then we would probably have to do some cleanup or do some stuff around the church.
You better believe it.
We had vacation Bible school. We had Christmas and Easter cantatas. We would go to the nursing homes. We would go on church trips, like the King's Dominion or the Busch Gardens. You were taught to respect the church. You were taught how to give. You were taught your role in the church and how to be what God would want you to be in the church. So my upbringing, was church. I mean, I ain't been in church all my life. I went out and did my thing, but I came back to that which I knew, which the Word of God says, you raise up a child, and when they're old, they will not depart from his teaching. So I came back to what I knew, and that was the church.
You mentioned Vacation Bible School, and youth choir and youth conferences and convocations and all of that good stuff. And all of that, I remember that's where a lot of us got our start, just giving speeches in church, right?
Exactly.
Building your confidence. And if you wanted to learn to play an instrument, most people learn to play by ear because they sat there next to the organist or the piano player and just watch the keystrokes.
And some of your greatest players in music came from the church because they sat there and they learned. That was one of the places where you could sit there and they'll give you that stick and they say, "Oh, here, boy, beat on that drum or whatever." And a lot of our musicians was developed in the church by sitting there watching and learning and picking up that trade, that craft.
Absolutely. And listen, I know they're not part of the black church, but they picked up a lot of the black music techniques. But when you talk about coming out of the church and playing piano, I think about Jimmy Swaggart and Jerry Lee Lewis.
Yeah.
Those guys, they were cousins back home in Louisiana.
And even our white brothers and sisters. a lot of them develop their talents out of the church.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's something about the church. I was in ministry and did a funeral. Sometimes you have a lot of young people. But just don't ever judge a book by its cover. Just because they look one way don't mean they don't know everything. And when the church, and we started, had a funeral, and the Spirit took over where, as we know in the church with the Holy Ghost, as we call it, get the shouting and dancing.
That's right.
A lot of those young people were standing up clapping, they could relate. Just because they might not have been there here now, it doesn't mean that they wasn't there before.
Right.
So which means there's something about the gospel music and the word in the church, it resonates with, I would say, even the chiefest of sinners. That is something about God and God's music and God's anointing. It'll shake your soul.
Come on now, and not just shape your soul, but also to help you get through.
Exactly.
Because we talked about the church itself. People come there to lay their burdens down. In society as black people, we couldn't go too many places to get the relief or the justice that we needed. So we go to church, and there you can lay your burdens down. You can cry out, like you said. The Spirit gets high. You catch the Holy Ghost. The Holy Ghost land up on you, and you move, and the Spirit of the Lord fills you, and it just fills the place, fills the room, consumes you, and then you can go back and make it one more day, right?
One more day, or one more week, or one more situation, or whatever. Exactly.
Absolutely. Pastor Carter, look, we so enjoyed having you on the show today. Listen, we could talk all day, but again, thank you so much for coming and talking with us about your experience and how the Black Church helped to move us. And thank you again in conjunction with PBS. We'll be doing this every single Sunday in the month of February, having local pastors here. And in the next hour, we'll talk about your experience in the Black church for the callers, and also the GOP, then and now. Where do we go from here? 757-823-9110. We'll be right back after this commercial break.
Catch the full court excitement of MEAC basketball today at Echoes Hall. The Norfolk State University Spartan men take on Coppin State today at 2 p.m. And you can catch all the action live on Blazing Hot 91. Blazing Hot 91 is the home of NSU Spartan basketball. That's the NSU Spartan men versus Coppin State today at 2 p.m. on Blazing Hot 91. Behold the green and gold. Blazing the Trails, a Black History moment.
Blazing Hot 91 salutes Cameron Darnell Chancellor, the former American football strong safety who played his entire career with the Seattle Seahawks and the NFL. Born in Norfolk, Virginia in April 1988, Cam played basketball and football while attending Maury High School. As a senior, he recorded more than 2,000 passing yards and 500 rushing yards. In 2015, Chancellor was named the most valuable player and placed on the All-Eastern District first team, as well as the Virginia Pilot All-Tidewater second team. Cam enrolled into Virginia Tech in 2006. Before his senior year, he was known as the greatest safety in Virginia Tech history. The Seattle Seahawks selected Chancellor in the 5th round in June 2010. Chancellor played with the Seattle Seahawks until May 2019.
Blazing the Trails, a Black History moment.
Welcome back. You're listening to Stay at the Water, and I'm your host, award-winning Dr. Eric Claville. And this month, in the month of February, which is Black History Month, we will be talking with African-American pastors of Black churches here in the local area, because we've teamed up and partnered with WHRO and PBS to help debut the Henry Louis Gates documentary, The Black Church. This is our story. This is our song, which debuts on February 16th through 17th. We just had a phenomenal discussion and conversation with Pastor Christopher Carter of New Hope Baptist Church, located in Hampton, Virginia, in the first half hour. And we talked about his experience in the Black church as well as a pastor and also as the owner of a funeral home. So how the segue of dealing with from what we call from cradle to the grave, and how the church actually helped to shape his life. So all month, we want to hear from you about your experience and how the Black church has helped you help to shape your life. 757-823-9110. 757-823-9110. But also here on State of Water, you know that we also talk about issues in politics and policy and law that are important to you and that keep you up to date on what's going on. Because at the end of the day, what's being passed in law in our city council, in our state legislature, and in the federal houses of Congress will affect you. But I want us to take a look at something a little different here. I want us to take a look at the party. And we're going to take a look specifically at one party, and that's the Grand Old Party, the GOP, also known as the Republican Party. Now, we know in our country we have two dominant parties, the Republican and the Democrats. We have some independent parties that come up and arise at a certain time and challenge the dominance of these parties. Of course, I think about Ross Perot, who challenged and really got a large percentage of the vote during that time period. But right now, the GOP, the Republican Party, some believe it's lost its way. In other words, they don't know exactly where it's going. Some believe that it's still the party of Lincoln. Of course, we know Abraham Lincoln was a great emancipator, and we know that being a great emancipator, the Republican Party was started on American conservatism, fiscal conservatism, and also social conservatism. Then it evolved to what we call the party of Reagan, of course, after Nixon. And then it evolved into what we see now as the party of Trump. So right now, the image of the Republican Party, they're searching. They're searching on where we go now. So what is that? Where do we go? We've got a caller. Caller, you're on the line. This is State of Water. Give us your name and where you're calling from. If you could turn your radio down for us in the background. Thank you so much. Caller, you're on the air. This is State of Water. Give us your name and where you're calling from. All right. We'll come back to that caller. We'll see if we can get them straight. But again, where is the party going? I remember when we talked about the party itself. We talked about Reagan, conservatism. We talked about fiscal conservatism, smaller government, and allow the people to have the freedom to operate in the country on a fair and equitable standard, which we know is not the case now. And then also, we see where social conservatism on issues such as being against abortion, for family values, quote unquote, and the like. But something happened between Reagan and Trump. Something happened to where the party itself, the identity, instead of being that of Abraham Lincoln and Ronald Reagan, it became the face of individuals of far-right extremism, the David Dukes of the world, and now the Donald Trumps of the world. Even now, there's a battle, there's a tug inside of the party, behind closed doors, that's playing out in front of everybody of who is the face and who's going to be the leader. You've got people that stood up to vote to impeach the president. 10 Republicans stood up and said, we can't have this. You got the Mitt Romneys of the world. You got the Liz Cheneys of the world. And these individuals were met with nothing less than vicious backlash by the people of their own party. As a matter of fact, Liz Cheney was censored in her state where she represents the people by her own party for voting to impeach the president. Voting for a president that on January 6th incited an insurrection. Voted for a president who voted to impeach a president who gave out not just dog whistles, but a bullhorn to people that raided Charlottesville in our Commonwealth, to people who thought it was okay to have training sessions to kidnap the governor of Michigan and the governor of Virginia. She voted to impeach a president who thought it was okay to push lies, which are now being challenged in the court, to say, hey, I really won the election. Well, there's a $2.7 billion lawsuit that some people are wrapped up in, and they're going to have to prove it. But who is the true face of the party? I want to hear from you. If you're a black Republican, black conservative, or you're a Democrat and just want to comment, or you're just a voter, who do you think is the face of the party? And can the Republican Party as we know it survive? I want to hear from you. 757-823-9110. 757-823-9110. So now, person see the face of the party being thousands, tens of thousands of people that were summoned, and we know some flew in on private jets. These aren't just people who can't make ends meet. These just aren't people who we think are, quote unquote, ignorant and uneducated. But we saw individuals that were wealthy that flew in on private jets, owners of companies in the community, real estate companies in Texas, grocery store chains in Louisiana, and members who are executive officers in companies that came to champion a lie. And all along, you have Vice President Pence standing very stoic saying, we support the American people. Well, what people, who are the American people you support? All along, we have Mitch McConnell saying our democracy is strong, and they're standing and clapping. But outside, you have tens of thousands of people saying, lynch Mike Pence. You have people who are saying a bullet to the head of Nancy Pelosi and Barack Obama is quicker. You have people who are posting on Facebook saying AR-15, the worst nightmare for, quote unquote, duly elected congresswomen of color deemed the squad. But we're supporting the American people. If you look now in various states, Pennsylvania, Arizona, and others, you see individuals leaving the Republican Party in droves. Now, this is just not a hiccup, right? People change parties here and there, but we're talking about thousands of people who are leaving. And after January 6th, they went to the clerk of court's office and changed their voter registration. This is a crisis for the Republican Party. I'm saying it here. It's a crisis. And you've got to if you love your party, heck, if you love democracy, if you love the way that we operate peacefully, you have to be alarmed at what's taking place. Now, again, you can believe what you want to believe. You can do what you want to do. But as long as you respect each other, respect your country, respect the process, that's what debate and negotiation is all about. That's what negotiation in bills and laws, and that's what politics is all about. Going back and forth, creating alliances, going back and forth, making sure that your constituents' needs are up front and those of your supporters, but ensuring that those needs do not overshadow the decency, the stability of our democracy. But somewhere, the GOP went off track. And when it went off track, it created someone called Donald Trump, who was able to rise from the ashes, rise as a phoenix. Well, actually, not ashes. He actually burned it down. But rise as a phoenix from all of that under-rumbling of what we call the dark web, or what we call the backroom talk, or what we call the far right, or the outliners, people that, they got some problems, but they don't really come to the front. Well, they came from the back and came all the way to the front. They skipped line. Now they're here. In some districts, Republican districts, 42% of voters or more believe and trust our former president. That's why he was able to rise like a phoenix and be the face and the voice and the tweets. He's off Twitter now, but he was the tweets of that particular faction of the party. Again, this is disturbing on many levels. But is it disturbing, or is it something that was created by the Republican Party themselves? Is this actually the end result of what happens when you give dog whistles to racists, when you give dog whistles to people that want to secede from a union, when you don't really handle the issues in your country or in our country? One thing I will say about America, this is our country. I love our country. As black people, we built our country, and we are going to continue to build it through the ideology, through the policy, through the laws, to make it the best country for all Americans, because that's what we should do, right? But what America has a problem with dealing with is really looking at ourselves in the mirror and dealing with the true issues of our nation and coming to reckon with it. Truth and reconciliation. We never came to true reckoning with the genocide of Native Americans. We never came to truth and reconciliation with the enslavement of Africans. We never came to truth and reconciliation about Jim Crow and many other travesties of our country. We never really came to truth and reconciliation about it. We kind of sweep it on the rug. And now we see all these problems bubbling to the top. And we got to deal with it. And that's one thing that not just our country, but the Republican Party has to reckon with and deal with if it's going to survive. But before we get to that point of it surviving, it's still in an internal fight. You have House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, who went down and said that we're not following Trump anymore, or he's not the face of us. But then he went down to Mar-a-Lago after he got some backlash and secured the support of the president to go on the campaign trail in 2022, which is right around the corner. So he hasn't left us, even though he will be on trial starting tomorrow for the second time. This has never happened before. I've never seen anybody, go to court these many times and get off. But he's doing it. Is he the Teflon political Don? I don't know. But more than likely, he will not be convicted in the Senate this week for the second time of being impeached by the House. The only president that has ever been, or federal officer that's ever been impeached 2 times in history. We don't see him being convicted, which means that he won't be held liable for what took place on January 6th. January 6th, we broadcasted live here on WNSB for several hours, giving analysis of what was taking place live in D.C. while they were going through the process that we've done for over 200 years of certifying the Electoral College votes of the votes that were certified by the states in order to stamp and seal the choice of the people, the voice of the people, of the president that they wanted to lead the country. That day, people were summoned to the White House for a rally in order to hype them up, to say, no, we won this election. It was a lie. We know that now. We knew it then. It's going to be proven even so in court because there was a $2.7 billion lawsuit filed against those that were perpetuating these lies. People lost their jobs. Lou Dobbs' show on Fox News was canceled because of it, because he was named in the lawsuit. You have other stations that are backtracking and trying to backwalk what they were saying. You have attorneys that are naming these suits, and they've got issues with their licenses if they're found liable in a civil court about this. It's just so many evolving issues based on a lie. And based on that lie, tens of thousands of people flew in, drove, walked. The QAnon shaman out of Arizona drove in. And by the way, he's organic food, and the judge said he can get organic food in jail. I tell you, if I'll just put a pin in that for a moment. The lady in Pennsylvania who broke into Nancy Pelosi's office to steal her laptop and sell it to Russia to make America great again. I don't know, but to sell it to Russia, the judge let her go with her mother because her mother said she'll be responsible for her. I don't know. Is there still white privilege and preference in the legal justice system? I think those 2 cases will tell you exactly that there is. I think it answers the question. But these individuals came, raided the Capitol. The party of law and order pushed against barriers that were set up by police. They pushed police. They beat police. They spit on police. They maced police, and they killed police, and they were able to walk out without being shot or harmed. Now, I'll say this, whatever training those Capitol Police got, they need to share that training with all of the police departments in our country. Because if they share that training, I guarantee you we wouldn't have as many shootings as we have on our streets between officers and individuals, African Americans, being apprehended. We see it happening. We see it happening too many times. And right now it needs to stop. But is that the true face of who the Republican Party is? Is that the true heartbeat of who the Republican Party is? What do you think? Are you a black Republican? Are you a Democrat? And you just want to know. 757-823-9110. 757-823-9110. Give us a call. We want to know what you think. And what is the future? Where can it go? But I want to spend just a little more time about what's going on now in the party behind closed doors. Liz Cheney, in a secret ballot vote, retained her position as the chair of the Republican Party, a certain committee in the Republican Party, I think third chair. But it was by secret vote. Over 136, I believe, Republicans voted for her to actually stay. But it was secret vote. But then you have individuals who voted, only 10 to impeach the president. And then you have 139 who also voted, I believe, to vote against Marjorie Greene, who's a U.S. Congresswoman who was then voted to be taken off of her committees. So you do one thing in private, but not another thing in public. I get it. I understand not wanting to have your dirty laundry out in the public. I understand taking care of things behind closed doors between the people that it needs to be taken care of. I understand that to an extent. But now the problem is in the out front, and you got to take care of it out there. We have congresspersons who are representing individuals in their states who are advocating conspiracy theories, who said that school shootings didn't happen, it was all actors. Imagine those parents hearing that of their kids that were killed in those massive school shootings, how they felt. I don't know if you ever lost a child. I don't know if you ever lost a sibling or lost a parent, or even lost them tragically. That's tough. But not only that, but also advocating for the violent execution of duly elected officials just because they disagree in policy. Let me tell you something. You could agree to disagree, but violence is never a place to solve an issue because violence only begets violence. It only begets violence. So those individuals voted to keep her on her committee, but they're saying that this is the future of the party. So where is the party now? Where is it at? Is this the face? Is this the face? Where do we go from here? I know we have a caller that's getting ready to call in. If you're having trouble coming in, we have a lot of calls. We'll get you in queue, 757-823-9110, 757-823-9110. If we can't get you a call in, we'll get you in queue and we'll get you on air because we have a few minutes left. I want to hear what you have to say because ultimately this show is about not just what is happening, but what you think should be the solution. So what is the solution? What is the solution for the party of Abraham Lincoln? What is the solution for the conservatism of Ronald Reagan? What is the solution for a party based in American, fiscal, and also social conservatism? Will it still be the face of Donald Trump? Or will it be a party to recapture its base, its foundation? Will it be a party, or will it be a party that devolves? We have a caller on there. Caller, you don't stay in the water. Tell us your name and where you're calling from. Caller, you're on the air. Tell us your name, where you're calling from.
Yes, my name is Jose. I'm calling from Norfolk, and I've been listening to your radio, and it's unfathomable how the Republican Party has turned out to be. As you said, it was a party of Lincoln, and today it's nowhere near resembling that. That they go for outright lies and put this country in jeopardy. It's just terrible. And that's all I wanted to say.
Absolutely, absolutely. So what do you think is the future? Where should he go now? Because from Lincoln to Trump, I mean, it seems like a 180.
No, that's a real long stretch there, but we as Democrats have got to be ready to be wherever it may be. We can't push them. They've got to wake up out of this situation themselves, and it's a shame that it might take a couple of more lives to do that.
Well, look, we hope not. You know, we've got a great democracy, a great system. Hopefully we can get some people with good sense that can work through that. Exactly. Thank you so much for calling State of Word. Thank you for your support. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Well, there you have it. Where is the party? Where should it go? It started out as the party of Abraham Lincoln, but now it's become the party of Trump. It started as a party evolved into the party of Ronald Reagan, of classical conservatism, but now it's evolved into conspiracy theories. But one thing I do know is that our country, we've been through a lot. We've been through much worse, and we've come out much stronger. Can we do it again? Can we survive our own selves? The battle within. Is this the new Civil War? Is it a war of ideology, a war of words, a war of policy? That answer, we don't know yet, but we're going to be watching. And here on Save the Water, we're going to be informing, we're going to keep talking, and we're going to continue to engage you, the community, to find out what you feel should be the best route for our country. Thank you again for joining us for Stay the Water. I'm your award-winning host, Dr. Eric Claville. We'll see you next Sunday at 1 o'clock.